Welcome to our Metastatic Breast Cancer podcast for December, where our theme for this month is of hope. And for what has been probably one of the most challenging years in recent history, we all need to be focused on hope now more than ever. But when we think about hope, it can be difficult, especially when you're living with metastatic breast cancer. So today we'll be exploring how each and every single one of you can open yourselves up to living with hope and to experience being present through your breath. Because until we take our last breath, there is always hope. Hope for us to change the way that we think, hope for us to wake up to a difference tomorrow, and hope for a better future. And that's the intention that I want all of you to be living with each day, in each moment. As 2020 draws to an end, we really need to be focused on the present moment and hope for the coming year. So we'll explore today how a mindfulness practice can really help us do that by anchoring ourselves and our breath in the present moment. Now, when we think about it, a lot of our suffering actually comes from resisting the present. However much we tell ourselves that we want to live in the present and should, we don't. We see ourselves time and time again off on some daydream or perhaps regretting some past action. We play the tape over and over and over in our minds of the past, or we project negatively into the future. And what we have to really understand is that happiness and peace can only be found in the present moment. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't learn from mistakes made in the past and we don't plan for the future. What it simply means is that we are stopping that habitual internal negative narrative that we all have, and we're learning to create space in between the constant, often negative thought forms that arise in our minds. The fact of the matter is, what even occurred 5 minutes ago, we cannot change. And what is to occur, we don't know. However, what we do know that what we are doing right now in this present moment will have a profound impact on tomorrow, the day after, next week, next month, and so on. So it's really important that we live with these intentions on a daily basis. So we're living this month with the intention of hope, and we're utilizing our breath as our tool to keep us anchored in the present moment so we can live in hope, away from the past, away from the future, but fully opening yourself up to the beauty of right now. And it's good to know the consequences of indulging in certain kinds of thinking. Most of it may seem to be innocuous little daydreams, but these distractions are the way ignorance maintains its hold over us. And so part of being present is actually beginning to notice what's happening in our mind. As it's only through conscious awareness that we can begin to make changes and to really begin to impact long-term thinking. And when I say long-term thinking, I mean long-term conscious thinking. We're thinking all the time. Your mind is constantly working, whether you are awake or whether you are asleep, which is why so many of us suffer from sleep disorders. So the mind is constantly active. Therefore, in order to create some peace and stillness, we have to do it consciously. And one of the fastest and quickest ways to do that is through your breath. I'll be guiding you through a very simple breathwork practice at the end of our podcast today that you can utilize daily to live with the intention of hope, to live with the intention of being present. And I strongly encourage all of you to do that. If our thoughts are charged with strong emotions, such as anger, fear, or revenge, we know that indulging these thoughts can lead to harmful behavior, and it leads to stress, it leads to anxiety. which we then know correlates to disease in the body. So instead, we simply learn to observe our emotions, observe our thoughts, and return to the present moment. It is your breath that really, truly allows you to keep anchored in the present. So how can you be present in the midst of pain and suffering? So in terms of happiness and pleasure, it's quite easy to be aware of the present. Let's be honest, when we're happy, it feels good to be present. We often don't want that moment or feeling to end. But what often happens is we can't even enjoy those moments of happiness because we're worried that they are going to end. We're worried about what is to come. And so that habitual internal negative narrative begins and takes over, hijacks the mind, hijacks those happy moments that become ever more fleeting in our lives. And what we need to understand in a fundamental principle of the philosophy of meditation and mindfulness is that there is the duality of life. And that suffering is an inevitable part of life, just like happiness and pleasure are also a part of life. And we have to have the balance of being, living with equanimity in both happiness and pain, in pleasure and suffering. And that's where our mindfulness practice really comes into play. And it's much more difficult than you potentially realize, or perhaps you do realize how difficult it is. But I can tell you, in all honesty, that if you are to practice every day what we're talking about in these podcasts, you will start to see a difference in your life. And so I invite you all in the coming month to live with the intention of hope and to utilize your breath as a tool to ensure that you can be hopeful with whatever comes your way. When we are happy, our self-image is much more fluid. Our mind appears undivided and whole, and we appear to be at peace. However, when pain arrives, it's like the rug is completely swept from underneath our feet, and it's quite a different thing altogether. It doesn't really matter whether it's physical or psychological, emotional, mental. We just feel complete unease, dis-ease in the mind that then manifests in the physical body. The mind then becomes separated from experience and goes into conflict with that pain. It may use its usual strategies of trying to get rid of it, trying to shut that negative narrative down, which we often do through distraction. So that's why we always want to be distracting ourselves. The practice of meditation and mindfulness teaches us that we have to be okay with sitting in that discomfort, because that actually enables us and inspires us to start to uncover the root cause of our suffering, our internal suffering, which then becomes our external suffering and inhibits us from living with hope. So it's only when we see this clearly that those strategies don't work, that we start to stop employing them. And through a dedicated meditation and mindfulness practice, you will learn the tools through these podcasts and through our live Zoom community gatherings virtually, where we are able to come together and learn new tools and new skills that can really help every single one of you deal with the daily trials, tribulations, and whatever turbulence is happening in your life, to anchor yourself through being present with your breath. Learning to come back to the present moment, even in the midst of pain, is what really helps us to mature on our path and our journey as humans. And it's not about being a martyr here. We're not looking to embrace suffering for the sake of it. Nobody wants the martyr. And if you do feel that you're playing into that martyr role, I invite you to maybe take a step back and think about things from a different perspective. It's not about falling on our sword. It's simply about understanding that through pain and suffering, we can experience peace and joy. There are two ways in which we suffer. Either we suffer with awareness and learn from it and let it season and mature us, or we just resist it by any method we can, which is what I talked about in terms of the distractions that we look for. Perhaps your distraction is that you're always watching television, or you always have to have some background noise on. Perhaps it's retail therapy. Perhaps it's always having to talk to people. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. But we have to also understand and appreciate that we have to welcome silence into our life, and we have to carve out time for it. We have to carve out time to practice meditation and mindfulness. These things just don't miraculously, occur without us putting in the time and effort to make them a daily part of our routine and regime. And there are so many other things. Perhaps it's over drinking, overworking, keeping busy, running away from responsibilities, and the list goes on. We can also blame others, which can be a very common way of not experiencing our own pain by deflecting it. So to live with hope, we truly have to embrace the full gamut of human emotions that we experience. And so I want you now to have your journal and pen ready. And you can take a moment to get your journal and pen if you don't have it. And then I want you to come back to a place of stillness as I guide you through a 3-part mindfulness breathing practice. So just come to a comfortable seat wherever you are, legs are uncrossed, spine is in a neutral position. And let's begin by gently closing the eyes if that feels good to you. You don't have to close the eyes. You can simply stare at a focal point on the ground. And we're going to begin with 3 deep inhales and 3 deep exhales. So begin by exhaling all of the air out of the lungs. And then taking a deep inhalation through the nose and a loud, audible exhale through the mouth. So really sigh that air out. That's what activates our parasympathetic nervous system response in the body, which is the aspect of our central nervous system that calms us. So let's do that 2 more times. Deep inhalation, loud, audible exhalation. 1 more time, your deepest inhalation yet, filling up your lungs to their highest capacity. And now completely releasing, letting everything go. And what we'll be doing is actually a portable breathwork practice, which can be very useful for our everyday lives, especially when things do get a bit hectic. You don't need to go into any special posture. You can actually do this practice anywhere at any time, be it in the checkout queue, be it in your car. You can do it for 10 seconds or a few minutes or longer, whatever serves you best. So step 1, I want you to acknowledge right now what is happening in your body, how you're feeling, what thoughts are present, and just observe. I don't want you to change any of this. I simply want you to take a moment to acknowledge how you're feeling without judgment, without criticism, in this present moment. I then want you to take your attention to your breath. You're not trying to breathe in any way right now. You are just simply breathing as it comes. So just notice how your breath feels in this moment. The breath is our anchor, so just experience it as it comes and as it goes. And just notice how you're breathing in this moment, how the breath feels in the body. And now I want you to expand this awareness to include the whole physical body. And just feel how the body is in this moment. Be interested. Notice how the breath feels and notice any physical sensations that may be arising in the mind. Any physical sensations that may be arising in the body. And just notice. Part of our problem is we live our lives completely distracted, where the mind is in one place, the physical body is somewhere else. And it's fundamentally through our breath, when we take an inhale and we take an exhale, that we are enabled to bring the body and mind together as one. So step 1, we're acknowledging how we're feeling, what's happening, thoughts, just observing. We're then taking this awareness to our breath, and then we're expanding this awareness to the rest of the body. And now release that and gently open your eyes. Get your paper and pen and just journal how that practice felt for you. How did it feel to bring the awareness to your mind, to your breath, and to the physical body? There's no right or wrong answer here. You're just journaling. Whatever came up for you, without judgment, without resistance. I'll leave you now so you can journal for longer. And I really invite and encourage you to listen to this podcast as many times as you need to continue a daily journaling practice and to live with our intention of hope for this month. Thank you.